This is actually one of the oldest recipes on my blog, but it stands the test of time. Who doesn't love crunchy, salty pretzels with sweet caramel and an array of different toppings? We're making my loaded caramel pretzels. We're gonna start with homemade caramel sauce. You can, of course, use store-bought caramels to make caramel sauce, but I always recommend homemade. So I have 1 cup of just regular granulated sugar in a saucepan on medium heat, and we're gonna melt the sugar down until it's golden brown. I like using homemade caramel, and it's a lot easier than you think. Just 4 simple ingredients brought together on the stove. You don't even need a candy thermometer. It comes together in about 10 minutes. When I first started making these caramel pretzels, I started with store-bought caramels, but over the years, I've really started loving it with homemade caramel because homemade caramel makes all of the difference. A lot of people are intimidated by making homemade caramel, and they will be surprised at just how simple it is and how versatile it is too. I love it with bundt cakes or pound cakes. It's great just drizzled on ice cream or as a dip for apples. There are so many ways to use this homemade caramel. This caramel sauce is actually one of the most popular recipes on my blog. I use it in everything from my salted caramel apple pie to my Snickers cheesecake, my coconut caramel chocolate cupcakes. It's also great in turtle brownies. The sugar will caramelize and it's gonna start to clump up and turn a light brown. Soon it will become a beautiful golden liquid. And that's when we can add the butter. All right, this melted sugar is looking really good. It's caramelizing, it smells so good. And once the sugar is completely melted, you can add the butter. So you'll need 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. It's gonna sizzle, that's perfectly normal. Just keep stirring. I like to have a whisk on hand as well, just in case the butter separates from the melted sugar. A whisk helps combine the two back together. The cooked caramelized sugar is gonna be really hot, and the butter that you add is just at room temperature, so that difference in temperature, it's gonna bubble up, so I always just have an oven mitt on hand. Caramel can burn really quickly, so just keep a close eye on it. As a food blogger, you have to wear a million tiny little hats. I mean, you have to be a food photographer, you have to edit food photography, you have to be a good baker or cook, you have to be a good writer, and you have to know social media like the back of your hand. It takes a lot of little tasks and a lot of energy to do all of those tasks. You also may get to a point where you can't do it all yourself anymore and you have to ask for help, and that's okay. That just means that you're growing. Once the butter and caramelized sugar is completely combined, you can add some heavy cream, just a ½ cup of heavy cream. Again, be careful when you're slowly pouring it in. It will splatter up, so I always kind of just stand back a little bit. You'll want to stir the whole time, except after you add the heavy cream, just let it boil for 1 minute. As the caramel boils, it will bubble up in the pan. After about a minute, just turn off the heat. Add salt. When I'm making salted caramel, I use 1 teaspoon of salt. When I'm making regular caramel, just a ½ teaspoon. This makes about a cup of caramel. You can store in mason jars, give it as gifts. I like to use a mason jar when I'm dipping the pretzels. The size and depth makes it perfect for dipping. It looks and smells so good. I'm just gonna pour it into a mason jar and let it cool for 10 minutes before we start dipping. The internet is always changing and evolving, and I just try to keep up with it. I love my job not only because it connects me with readers from all over the world and it allows me to make a career out of my passion, baking, but I love it because I've met so many people. Running a blog can be pretty isolating because you're just doing it by yourself. I mean, you don't really have any coworkers unless you have assistants, and I'm glad I do. But it's nice to have other bloggers. They're your coworkers. You know, you have to work together. When it starts to stop being fun and enjoyable, it came to a point where there was just so much work for me to do. I didn't want to stop any of it. So I thought, well, maybe it's time to have an assistant. Maybe it's time to have help, because it's impossible to do it all yourself and stay sane. It's just a lot of work. When I was looking for an assistant, I put it out there on my blog. I thought, like, how am I ever gonna find someone to help me with this business? And I thought, hey, my blog readers, they love baking and they enjoy my blog. Who better to ask? I was just overwhelmed with work, and I'm so grateful. I have 2 assistants, and I don't know how I would run this business without them. Hiring has really helped lift a lot of weight off my shoulders, and it's kind of fun to have other people in it with me and to brainstorm off of each other. It was a one-woman show up until a couple years ago, and I'm glad that I have help now. It's so much fun. I have coworkers. Caramel is slightly cooled, it's ready to go. Let's get dipping. So I just like to use pretzel rods. They're really easy to dip and display and snack on. And the mason jar makes it really, really easy just to dunk right in there. There we go. And for toppings, you can really use whatever you want. I like rainbow sprinkles. You can do mini chocolate chips or crushed up candy bars. Some crushed nuts would be great. There are so many options, really whatever your heart desires. And I always like to have a little plate underneath just to catch all of the extras. The caramel may drip off the pretzel a little bit, that's completely fine. And I recommend sprinkling the little toppings on top instead of just rolling the caramel dipped pretzel in the toppings. The warm caramel can kind of melt those toppings. They're great, they're really, really quick to make. It probably takes about 20 minutes from start to finish. Sweet and salty is just always a good combination. This recipe is great if you have extra candy lying around. Crush it up, dip those pretzels in caramel, top them with all of the different toppings. It's a fun interactive treat, get the kids involved. It's all about having fun in the kitchen. And I can't have a couple hours in the office without Jude laying here by my side, but things change and I get thrown off track when the mailman comes and he just starts going crazy and starts barking. Franklin isn't as attached as Jude is, but Franklin, he's a puppy. He just likes to play, and he gets a little nervous sometimes with people in the house and when the mailman comes, and so he'll come and he'll sit under my desk and he'll just want some pets and to be comforted. If I'm not living my life, I really don't have anything interesting to say in my blog posts. I try to just keep to the recipe, but I always like to add little snippets of real life here and there. And so I remind myself, well, hey, I haven't done anything recently, so let's get out of the house, let's do something. It's just always nice to have balance, and I feel like I can get sucked into the online world, and it's wonderful and it's great, but it's also nice to, hey, go outside, just to create fun memories, especially now that I have a daughter. I want to get out there. I want to bring her places. I want to spend the day at the zoo. I want to bring her to the aquarium. I love getting out there more and more. Readers really like it when you get a little personal, so I try to work in maybe a little snippet from my real life, a little story here or there. Just try and make it a little endearing so people can connect with it, just because I want to spark some type of emotion so readers are like, hey, you know what? I want to try that too. These are great for parties because you can kind of set it up so everyone can top their own pretzel with whatever they want. They can bring their own toppings. You can have a lot of fun displaying these. You can stick them all up in a cup. You can individually wrap them. If it's warm outside, I do suggest just sticking in the refrigerator for about 10 to 20 minutes before serving. And with your last pretzel, you can have a little fun. Just use all of your extra candies right here on the plate. I call this the crazy one. These are more special than chocolate-covered pretzels because you don't see caramel pretzels sold everywhere. These pretzels are so much fun because you can customize with different little toppings. I love crushed candy or sprinkles, of course. I mean, the sky's the limit.